The Galactic Council chamber stood like a cathedral of stars, its domed ceiling alive with projected constellations, each shining point marking an empire that claimed dominion across the galaxy. Delegates of countless species filled the grand hall, their bodies glittering with ceremonial robes, metallic scales, or glowing crests, each one a symbol of pride and power. They had gathered to discuss a new matter, a species that had lingered on the edge of their notice for too long, humanity. Whispers had spread of Earth's growth, of colonies beyond their fragile blue world, of fleets built quietly in the void. Yet to the Council, these were only whispers, amusing tales from the frontier. Today, they were here to confront those whispers directly, and the mood was less of concern and more of mockery. At the center of the chamber, under the glaring light of the Council's focus, stood a single figure draped in a simple black suit. He was the human ambassador, the chosen voice of his people. His posture was calm, his shoulders straight, his hands resting gently at his sides. His face carried no anger, no arrogance, only a faint smile that never left his lips. The alien delegates studied him with narrowed eyes and sneers. To them, he seemed unimpressive, short-lived, frail, fragile compared to their towering bodies and ancient lineages. One delegate, a scaled creature from the Dravari Dominion, hissed loudly, his voice echoing through the chamber. So this is humanity. A death-world race, they call themselves. Yet here they stand, clothed in soft fabric, with skin that tears at the slightest touch. Tame. Weak. Soft. Laughter spread across the chamber, a chorus of cruel amusement that echoed off the walls. Another delegate, her body shimmering like liquid silver, tilted her head and let out a mocking hum. Perhaps they think courtesy is strength. Look how he smiles, how polite he stands. Do they not understand that in this chamber, weakness is not tolerated? The human ambassador remained quiet, his eyes calm, his faint smile unchanged. He bowed his head slightly in acknowledgement, as if their insults were nothing more than raindrops falling on stone. Yet behind his stillness, something simmered, something the aliens did not see, or perhaps refused to notice. The mockery continued, each insult sharper than the last. A warlord from the Tarvek clan slammed his fist against the table, his armored hand leaving cracks in the metal. Where are your warriors, human? Where are your fleets? Do you think your polite words will shield your fragile world when war comes? We could burn your Earth in a single day. Gasps filled the chamber, but quickly turned to laughter once more, as though the image of Earth burning was nothing more than a jest to entertain them. The ambassador looked up then, his smile still faint but his eyes locking with the warlord's. For a moment, silence passed between them, heavy and unsettling, before the ambassador's gaze moved on without a word. More laughter followed, but some felt a chill crawl down their spines. A delegate with crystalline skin leaned forward, her voice sharp with disdain. Humans spread like vermin, breeding on rocks and stations, yet they bring no strength, no technology, no legacy. They come to this chamber expecting recognition, but what have they earned? They are a minor species pretending to be significant. Another added, his mandibles clicking with cruel rhythm, perhaps they should serve, not sit among us. Perhaps humanity's role is not as allies or equals, but as workers, useful only in chains. The laughter grew louder now, filling the hall, bouncing from wall to wall until it became a cruel orchestra. Yet still, the ambassador did not speak. He stood tall, his calm expression never faltering, his smile never breaking. Only his eyes, sharp and calculating, betrayed a storm beneath the surface. For all their power, the council had not seen it yet. The silence of the human was not surrender. It was restraint. The mockery stretched on, dragging like a blade across stone. The delegates competed with one another, each insult more vicious than the last. They called humanity a fragile species, a mistake of evolution, an accident that had wandered too far into the stars. They mocked Earth's wars, calling them primitive conflicts fought with crude tools. They laughed at humanity's short lifespans, claiming that such fleeting lives could never understand the weight of true galactic power. The chamber roared with cruel delight, but beneath the sound, a quiet dread was beginning to grow in the hearts of a few. Not all delegates joined in the laughter. A handful watched the human closely, studying not his weakness, but his silence. An elder from the Othari, her eyes deep and ancient, whispered to her neighbor, "Do you not see? He is not breaking. He is waiting." Her words were ignored, swallowed by the thunder of mockery. The ambassador finally raised his head, his faint smile unwavering. His gaze swept across the chamber, meeting the eyes of those who insulted him, one by one. For each, his silence carried a weight they did not understand. Some shifted uncomfortably, though they did not know why. The silence was heavy, deliberate, controlled. It was the silence of someone who could speak, who could unleash, but chose not to, at least not yet. Suspense thickened in the chamber, though the laughter did not stop. One delegate, emboldened by the chorus, leaned forward, his voice booming with arrogance. "Tell us, human. When the flames of war come, when your polite words fail, who will save your kind? You. Or will you simply smile as your world burns?" The ambassador's eyes met his. The faint smile remained, but something in his gaze sharpened, as though a blade had been drawn behind his calm expression. He did not answer, not yet. Instead, he inclined his head slightly, the gesture so subtle it almost seemed like a bow. The silence that followed was thin, fragile, as if the air itself waited for what would come next. The council did not know it, but in that moment they had crossed an unseen line. They had mistaken patience for weakness, courtesy for fragility, politeness for submission. They had pushed too far. The ambassador's silence, once calm and polite, now carried something else, something heavier, something dangerous. The council chamber, filled with mocking laughter, had unknowingly lit the spark that would burn across the galaxy. And though no words were spoken, though no threats were made, every heart in that room felt it in some small, unspoken way. Something had shifted. Humanity was not tame. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was only waiting. The laughter in the council chamber echoed long after the human ambassador lowered his gaze again, but hidden beneath the waves of mockery were whispers, faint and uneasy, from those who were old enough to remember things others had chosen to forget. At one corner of the chamber, a frail delegate of the Zorathai Alliance shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His body was cloaked in layers of silk and crystal, but his eyes trembled as he watched the silent human standing at the center. To the others, the human's smile looked harmless, but the elder felt a chill crawling down his spine. He leaned toward the delegate beside him, his voice low, almost broken. "Do you not see? The silence of predators is never weakness. I have heard this before. In the old wars." His neighbor waved him off with irritation, muttering about paranoia. But the elder's words lingered. Farther up the chamber, a matriarch of the Yalari Confederation stirred uncomfortably. Her memories stretched across centuries, and though she had never fought humans herself, she had studied the archives of the early encounters. The reports had been scrubbed from official records, rewritten as myths, but she remembered the raw accounts, the desperate cries of fleets, the warnings of generals who spoke of humanity's refusal to yield. She watched the human ambassador closely now, his calmness too controlled, his stillness too deliberate. She whispered to her assistant, "They should not mock. If they knew what I know, they would not laugh." But her assistant, young and eager to mirror the arrogance of the chamber, only smirked. "Humans are relics of a forgotten war. They are nothing compared to us." The matriarch fell silent, but her gaze did not leave the human. Others too shifted with unease. Delegates from border colonies, whose people lived closer to the fringe of human space, avoided meeting the ambassador's eyes. They had seen glimpses of human endurance, of their stubbornness, in small trade conflicts and disputes. They had seen human miners work without rest, human soldiers fight with broken weapons, human settlers rebuild their homes again and again after disasters that would have crushed other species. They had filed reports warning the Council not to underestimate Earth's children, but those reports had been buried under arrogance and laughter. And now, in this chamber, their warnings went unheard again. A delegate from the Valari Guild stood and raised his voice, his tone edged with anger instead of mockery. "Enough of this laughter. Do you fools not remember the tales? Do you not recall what our ancestors said when humanity first entered the stars? They said humans did not fight for victory alone. They fought to survive, and in survival, they could not be broken. We united once before to stop them, and it was not an easy victory. We erased their history because we feared it. And yet now, you laugh in their faces." His words struck the chamber like a thrown stone, and for a moment, the laughter faltered. Some shifted uneasily, but then a booming voice rose from the Tarvek warlord, the same who had threatened Earth moments earlier. He sneered, his armored jaw snapping shut like iron. "Old stories to frighten children. Humanity is weak. Look at them now, standing in silence, smiling as we insult them. If they were truly dangerous, would they not already strike? Where are their fleets? Where are their armies? Do you not see? They are pretending at power. We are the rulers of the galaxy, not them. Laughter returned with his words, stronger, harsher, drowning out the delegate who had tried to warn them. The ambassador at the center of the chamber remained still, his polite smile unchanged, his silence deeper than ever. But to those who truly looked, his eyes told a different story. They were sharp, steady, and cold. They held the weight of storms, the patience of a predator waiting for prey to move just one step too close. The Yalari matriarch leaned back in her chair, her hands trembling as she whispered only to herself, "They will learn too late. They always do." Outside the chamber, across the networks of the galaxy, reports of humanity's growth had already been dismissed as exaggerations. Colonies that had warned of advanced Terran fleets were ignored. Traders who claimed to have seen massive warships hidden in uncharted sectors were silenced. The Council had chosen not to believe, not to prepare. They told themselves that humans were too tame, too soft, too fragile to ever matter. And so the warnings went unheard. Inside the chamber, the insults grew sharper, the laughter louder. The human ambassador bowed his head once more, as if yielding, but deep within the silence there was something the Council could not hear, an echo of patience breaking, of masks slipping, of storms rising. The few who remembered felt their stomachs twist with dread. They knew what the others could not accept. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was waiting. And when polite mode ended, when restraint was gone, the galaxy would remember why they had once feared the children of Earth. The chamber swelled with noise, the alien delegates throwing insults like blades, their voices rising in cruel unison, but at the center of it all the human ambassador remained unchanged. His shoulders did not tense, his hands did not clench, his breathing stayed calm, and on his face the faint smile still lingered like a mask carved from stone. He bowed his head when mocked, he nodded when ridiculed, and he even allowed a small chuckle when laughter spread at his expense. To the Council, this was confirmation of their belief. Humans were soft, harmless, and polite to the point of foolishness. Yet to the few who studied him closely, the politeness felt unnatural, too controlled, like a predator lowering its eyes before a strike. The ambassador finally raised his hand, not to silence the chamber but as a gesture of respect. His voice, when it came, was soft, steady, and almost soothing. "Honored Council, humanity thanks you for allowing us a place in this chamber. We value your wisdom, your guidance, and your long years of leadership in the galaxy." His tone was courteous, his words humble, but to those who listened carefully there was a subtle undercurrent, something hard as steel beneath the surface. The laughter quieted briefly, surprised by his calmness, but then returned with greater force. The Tarvek warlord leaned back in his chair, sneering. "Do you see? They bow and scrape like servants. Perhaps they were made to kneel." His words drew more mocking laughter, yet the ambassador did not flinch. Instead, he inclined his head once more. "If courtesy is seen as weakness, then perhaps humanity has much to learn from you," he said softly, his eyes sweeping across the hall. "But I wonder if you have forgotten that patience and restraint are not weakness, but choices." His words fell into the chamber like drops of cold water, subtle but chilling. Some delegates shifted in their seats, uncomfortable though they could not say why. The polite mask remained firmly in place, but there was an edge to his words, a suggestion that the mask was only a veil hiding something far sharper. The Council laughed again, trying to smother the unease, but the sound no longer rang as confidently as before. The Yalari matriarch narrowed her eyes, watching the ambassador's expression with growing fear. She had seen masks like this before, long ago, on warriors who smiled politely before unsheathing their blades. She whispered to her assistant, "They do not understand. They think his calm is weakness, but it is a wall. And when that wall breaks, it will be too late." But the assistant shook his head, blind to the danger. Around the chamber, more insults came, each harsher than the last. They called Earth a cradle of primitives, mocked humanity's fragile skin, their short lives, their crude ships. They spoke of burning human colonies, of enslaving their people, of reducing their culture to ashes. Through it all, the ambassador listened politely, nodding, smiling faintly, answering only with short respectful acknowledgments. His politeness frustrated some, emboldened others, and unsettled the few who recognized the danger of such silence. At one point, a delegate sneered, "Do you not defend your world, human? Do you not fight back against our words? Or are you too meek, too tame to raise your voice?" The ambassador turned his gaze toward him, his smile still faint, his eyes calm yet piercing. "Why should I be offended by words," he said softly, "when actions speak far louder?" The chamber froze for a moment at the subtle weight in his answer. Then, as if to cover the silence, the delegates roared with laughter again. But the laughter was strained now, some glancing nervously at the human as if realizing too late that the polite mask might not be permanent. The ambassador stood silently once more, his hands folded neatly, his voice quiet, his presence humble. But behind the mask, behind the smile, behind the careful restraint, there was something gathering, something vast and patient, something that the council could not yet see but would soon feel. Humanity's polite mode had not been weakness. It had been warning. And the galaxy, blind in its arrogance, ignored it. The council chamber had turned into a theater of cruelty. Every insult thrown at the human ambassador seemed to fuel the arrogance of the alien delegates, their laughter rising higher, their voices sharper. For long moments the human stood calm, smiling politely, bowing his head when addressed, answering with courtesy that cut against the venom in their words. But arrogance always pushed too far, and arrogance always mistook patience for surrender. It was the Tarvek warlord again who decided to break the last line. His hulking armored form leaned forward, his voice booming like thunder. "Enough of this charade. Let us speak plain. Humanity is nothing. A fragile species clinging to a fragile world. You build colonies, you build fleets, but all of it is dust. We could burn your earth to cinders in a single day. Your people would scream, and we would laugh as your blue world turned to ash. That is your truth." His words echoed like a blade across stone, and for the first time the laughter in the chamber did not follow. A stillness spread, thick and suffocating, as the human ambassador slowly raised his head. The faint smile that had never left his lips faltered, then disappeared entirely. His eyes, once calm and polite, sharpened with a coldness that made the air feel heavier. The silence in his expression was no longer courtesy, it was warning. Every delegate felt it, though few admitted it. The warlord sneered, mistaking the silence for fear. "Do you have no words, human? Do you bow to us even as we speak of the death of your homeworld? Is your smile gone because you finally understand your place?" The ambassador's voice, when it came, was quiet, calm, but it carried through the entire chamber with a weight that no one expected. "You speak of fire on earth as though it is a jest," he said slowly, his words precise, measured, unshaken. "But you forget what fire made us. You forget what storms forged us. You forget what wars tempered us. We are children of a world that tried to kill us every day. And yet we lived. And yet we grew. And yet we stand here." The silence grew deeper, pressing on every ear, every mind. Delegates who had mocked him leaned back now, uncomfortable under the steady gaze of the human's eyes. He continued, his voice still calm but sharpened like steel. "You mistake our courtesy for weakness. You mistake our patience for surrender. You mistake our silence for fear. But know this, there are limits to patience. There are limits to courtesy. And when those limits are passed, when the mask falls away, his gaze swept the chamber, lingering on each delegate one by one, until many looked down, unable to meet his eyes. You will remember why your ancestors united against us. You will remember what it means when polite mode ends." A chill rippled across the chamber. The delegates shifted in their seats, some scoffing weakly, others silent and pale. The Tarvek warlord snarled, his pride wounded, but even he did not immediately rise to mock again. The human ambassador stood taller now, his hands no longer folded gently but resting firmly at his sides, his presence heavier, sharper. The polite mask was gone. What remained was something colder, something stronger, something that carried the weight of history behind it. For the first time since the meeting began, the council chamber was quiet. Not because the laughter had ended naturally, but because fear had stolen the voices of even the most arrogant. The breaking point had come, and though no weapon had been drawn, though no fleet had yet appeared, the galaxy had already begun to tremble. Humanity's silence had ended. The council chamber had never been so quiet. The great dome, built to echo voices of 1,000 species, now carried nothing but the faint hum of air filters and the pounding hearts of delegates who suddenly realized their laughter had died on their lips. The human ambassador stood in the center, his faint smile gone, his posture straighter, his eyes sharper. He did not move, he did not raise his voice further, but the weight of his silence was more terrifying than any threat. It pressed down on every delegate like invisible chains, and for the first time many of them felt what it meant to be prey beneath the gaze of a predator. The Tarvek warlord shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his armored frame restless. He opened his mouth to speak again, but when his eyes met the ambassador's, the words caught in his throat. Something in that calm, steady gaze froze him, something that said, without needing words, that one step further would be his last. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. The chamber that had roared with insults now felt like a tomb. Even the arrogant silver-skinned delegate who had mocked humanity most harshly earlier sat frozen, her fingers twitching nervously against the table. She tried to smirk, to cover her unease, but the expression cracked under the weight of the stillness. The ambassador's voice came again, soft and steady, each word cutting through the silence like a blade. For centuries. But no words came. The fear in his eyes said everything. The human ambassador let the silence settle again, then added, softly but with finality, "Polite mode is over." The words hung in the chamber like a death sentence. The delegates felt it in their hearts, in their bones, in their history. Humanity had revealed itself, and the revelation was worse than their nightmares. For centuries they had convinced themselves the stories were lies, the warnings exaggerations, the fear an overreaction. Now they knew the truth. The humans had been patient, hiding in the dark, growing strong, waiting for the moment when the mask would no longer be needed. And that moment had come. The chamber was still ringing with the echoes of the human war cry when the screens flickered again, shifting from the silent council chamber to the cold void of space. The human fleet, black against the stars, moved with precision that no council fleet had ever shown. They did not scatter, they did not drift like clumsy giants, they slid into formation as if guided by one will, each ship an extension of the other, every movement sharp and perfect. The delegates watched with wide eyes, some clutching their tables as though the images themselves might reach out and crush them. At first the fleet did nothing but drift, its massive engines glowing faintly red like embers waiting to ignite. Then the demonstration began. One of the Terran ships turned its cannons toward an asteroid belt on the edge of the system, a field of rock so massive that it had stood untouched for thousands of years. With a single burst of light, a beam of energy ripped across the void and struck the largest of the asteroids. The delegates gasped as the rock, larger than most moons, shattered instantly into fragments that scattered like dust. No delay, no cracking, no resistance, just obliteration. The chamber erupted with voices, some shrieking in disbelief, others denying what they saw. Impossible. No weapon has such power. This is illusion, it must be illusion. But the display did not stop. More human warships turned, their cannons humming with restrained fury. Together they fired, not at enemy ships, not at colonies, but at the dead belt of stone. What had been a chain of asteroids a heartbeat ago was reduced to nothing but drifting gravel and molten fragments glowing in the void. Each shot was controlled, precise, clean. Not a single blast veered off target, not a single strike wasted. The humans were not showing weapons. They were showing discipline. The fleet shifted again, their ships forming a line so straight and sharp it looked like a blade stretching across the stars. Then, in perfect unison, they activated their shields. The energy fields spread outward, colliding with one another, merging into a single shimmering wall of power that stretched across the system. The council delegates stared in disbelief. That should not be possible, one stammered, his mandibles clicking nervously. No fleet can link shields that way. But humans could. And they had. As if to emphasize the point, one of the Terran ships pulled away and released a salvo of missiles. They streaked forward at impossible speed, their trails cutting across the void. Just before impact, the shield wall shimmered, and instead of detonating, the missiles curved, redirected by the human's own systems, spinning harmlessly into space before detonating in a controlled pattern that lit the stars with artificial fire. It was not just power. It was control. The council chamber fell silent again, the delegates pale, trembling, their arrogance bleeding away like sand in water. They had mocked, they had laughed, they had threatened Earth itself, and now, before their eyes, they saw what humanity had built while they were ignored. The ambassador did not gloat. He did not raise his voice. He simply spoke, his words steady and sharp. You asked for proof. You asked where our fleets were. Now you see them. We could have fired at your worlds, at your ships, at your stations. But we did not. Remember that restraint. His eyes scanned the chamber, and no one met his gaze this time. Not even the Tarvek warlord, whose fists trembled against the table, his pride shattered beneath the weight of the revelation. On the screens, the fleet shifted again, this time splitting into wings, each wing moving in a different direction, vanishing into the dark with terrifying coordination. They were gone in seconds, as if swallowed by the void, leaving only silence behind. The chamber erupted with whispers, but none dared raise their voice too high. They knew now what had been hidden for centuries, what their ancestors had feared so much that they had buried the truth under lies. The humans were not weak, not soft, not tame. They were predators who had chosen to hide their claws, and now those claws had been revealed once more. The ambassador's voice came one final time, cold and quiet, echoing through the chamber. Do not mistake restraint for weakness. Do not mistake patience for submission. We are done being polite. And with that, he fell silent, letting the fear and the weight of his words crush the chamber deeper than any weapon ever could. The chamber that once rang with arrogant laughter was now filled with whispers and trembling voices. The screens above had gone dark again, leaving only the dim glow of the stars on the ceiling and the faint hum of the chamber's systems. But no one looked relaxed anymore. No one dared lean back in their seats or laugh at the humans standing calmly in the center. The revelation had broken something inside the council, something that could not be repaired. The delegates looked at each other with wide, uneasy eyes, their voices lowered to whispers that carried like the rustle of dry leaves. The Tarvek warlord, once booming with insults, now sat stiff and silent, his armored fists clenched so tightly that cracks ran along the metal of the table. He finally broke the silence, his voice low, filled with frustration and pride. This is deception. It must be. Humans cannot have built such fleets. They cannot have hidden them from us. If they could do this, then what were we doing all these years? But his words lacked conviction. Even as he spoke, his eyes darted nervously, betraying his fear. A crystalline delegate stood, her glowing form flickering faintly as if her body itself was unsteady. Deception, she repeated, her voice trembling. You saw it. We all saw it. Those were not illusions. Those were warships. Hundreds of them. Ships built for one purpose. And the howl, did you not feel it? I felt it in my bones. No machine creates that. That was real. Her words sent murmurs spreading again, panic rising like a tide. Some delegates shouted for calm, others slammed their hands against the tables to be heard, but the chamber was unraveling. Half the council wanted to deny what they had seen, to hide behind arrogance, while the other half whispered that it was already too late. The Yalari matriarch, who had sat silent through the chaos, finally rose to her feet. Her voice, though old and weary, cut through the noise. Fools. All of you. You laugh at predators and then tremble when they bare their teeth. I warned you. Many of us warned you. But you ignored it. You buried the past. You erased the records. You mocked the truth. And now, the truth stands before you. She pointed one trembling hand toward the human ambassador, who still stood calmly, his hands folded, his face unreadable. He has not threatened us. He has not attacked us. Yet you are already broken by fear. Do you not see? That is power greater than fleets or weapons. That is the power of memory, the power of history, the power of survival that no empire of ours can match. Her words silenced the chamber for a moment, but silence only left room for fear to grow deeper. Another delegate, his mandibles clicking uncontrollably, leaned forward, his voice shrill. Then what do you suggest? That we bow to them? That we hand over our worlds, our fleets, our power? No. If they threaten the council, then we must strike first. We must destroy them now before they spread. His words echoed in the chamber, but they were hollow. Even those who nodded in agreement looked pale, their confidence brittle. They had seen the demonstration. They had seen what human warships could do to stone and steel. They knew deep down what would happen if those cannons turned on their worlds. Another voice rose, calm but trembling. Strike them. With what? Do you not remember what you just saw? They destroyed moons as if they were dust. They wove their shields into one wall. Our fleets cannot even coordinate without tearing each other apart. If we strike, we will lose. If we strike, we will burn. The argument tore through the chamber like wildfire. Delegates screamed over each other, some demanding war, others demanding retreat, some insisting on negotiations, others swearing that humans could never be trusted. Pride clashed with survival, arrogance fought with fear, and the once united council showed its cracks for all to see. Through it all, the human ambassador did not speak. He stood silently, his eyes cold and unblinking, his calmness more terrifying than the chaos around him. The delegates could not ignore him, could not forget he was there, watching, waiting. The longer he stood silent, the deeper their fear grew. Finally, the High Speaker, a being of crystal and light who had ruled the chamber for centuries, struck his staff against the floor. The sharp sound silenced the delegates instantly, but even his glow was dimmer than usual, his voice unsteady. Enough. The council must not fall apart in fear. Humanity has shown us power, yes. But we are still the council. We must act with reason. Yet even as he spoke, his words carried no weight. Every delegate in the chamber knew the truth, though few dared say it aloud. The council was no longer in control. The balance of the galaxy had shifted in a single meeting, in a single demonstration. And it had shifted in humanity's favor. The chamber fell quiet again, not with pride, not with arrogance, but with fear. The council had seen the truth. Humanity was not tame. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was the storm waiting just beyond their walls, and now that storm had arrived. The chamber was already cracked by fear, voices trembling, arguments breaking like glass, but when the human ambassador finally moved, silence swallowed the council whole. He did not raise his hands, he did not shout, he did not show anger. He simply stepped forward, each footfall echoing in the vast hall like a drumbeat, until he stood at the exact center beneath the dome of stars. His eyes swept the chamber slowly, one delegate at a time, and not a single one could hold his gaze for long. Those who had mocked him earlier now found their throats dry, their claws trembling, their eyes falling to the floor. Even the Tavek warlord, armored and towering, shifted uneasily in his seat, as if the calm human before him carried more weight than any army. Then the ambassador spoke. His voice was calm, smooth, almost gentle, but it carried across the chamber with the force of thunder. You asked who will save humanity when fire comes. You asked who will protect Earth when enemies threaten. And you laughed when you spoke of burning our world. He paused, letting the words hang, letting the silence deepen until it pressed on their chests like stone. Then he continued, slower, sharper. Understand this, Earth has never needed saving. We were born in fire. We were forged in storms. We were tempered in wars that would have broken your species before you took your first steps into the stars. And yet we are still here. You should ask not who will save us, but who will save you. His words fell into the chamber like blades. Delegates froze in their seats, their faces pale, their scales dull, their crystalline bodies flickering dim. No one laughed now. No one dared. He raised his head higher, his gaze sweeping over the chamber like a predator watching prey. For centuries we endured your silence. We listened to your insults. We tolerated your arrogance. We came here with courtesy, with patience, with restraint. You mistook all of it for weakness. His voice sharpened, cold steel wrapped in calm. But patience is not infinite. Courtesy is not surrender. And restraint is not fear. We gave you politeness. And you spat on it. His words struck the chamber harder than any weapon, because they were not threats, they were truths. Delegates shifted uneasily, their hearts pounding, their pride collapsing under the weight of those truths. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping so low it felt as if the air itself carried it into their bones. Now you see what happens when polite mode ends. A tremor ran through the chamber. The screens flickered again, showing the Terran fleet still waiting in the void, their weapons cold but their engines burning like the eyes of predators who had not yet chosen to strike. The delegates stared in silence, their bodies trembling. The ambassador looked up at the images for a moment, then back to the chamber. We do not ask for your respect. We do not beg for your acceptance. We will not kneel to your counsel. You may remember us as soft, as tame, as weak, but from this day forward, you will remember us as what we have always been, the children of a death world. We are humanity. And we are done being polite. His words echoed through the chamber, filling every corner, etching themselves into the minds of every delegate present. For long moments, no one moved. The galaxy's most powerful leaders sat frozen, unable to answer, unable to breathe, unable to deny the truth standing before them. The human ambassador turned then, slowly, deliberately, and walked back to his place at the center, his posture calm, his movements unhurried. He had spoken, and nothing more needed to be said. The silence he left behind was not emptiness. It was a storm waiting to break. The council chamber sat in silence long after the human ambassador's words had faded. The great dome, filled with arrogant laughter hours before, now seemed like a tomb. Delegates shifted uneasily, their faces pale, their bodies tense, their eyes darting between each other but never toward the human who stood calmly at the center. The fleet still glowed on the screens above, a silent reminder that this was not a bluff, not an empty show of arrogance, but a truth written in steel and fire. Every second that passed without words felt heavier, until the very air in the chamber seemed to thicken. The high speaker finally tried to rise, his crystalline body glowing faintly, but his voice shook as he spoke. The council must remain strong. We cannot bow to fear. But the words rang hollow. Everyone knew it. His glow flickered like a dying flame, and his authority cracked under the weight of the storm hanging over them. Whispers broke out again, some sharp, some trembling. We cannot fight them. If we do nothing, they will consume us. What choice do we have? The humans, how many more fleets do they hide? The chamber fractured into chaos, pride clashing with terror, arrogance with survival. Some demanded retaliation, insisting that a united council could still outnumber the humans. Others shouted back in panic that numbers meant nothing against predators forged by death itself. The room that had once mocked humanity now begged, argued, and shook with fear of what they had unleashed. Through it all the ambassador stood still, his silence heavier than any word. He did not need to speak. The chaos itself was proof of his victory. The council was broken, not by weapons, but by truth. Outside, across the galaxy, the echoes of the revelation spread faster than light. In border colonies, traders whispered of human warships tearing asteroids apart with a single blast. In military stations, commanders replayed the howl of Terran engines again and again, their soldiers pale and trembling. On distant worlds, civilians prayed to gods they had long forgotten, hoping the storm would not reach them. In secret corners, veterans who had once fought in the old wars collapsed in despair, their voices breaking as they whispered to the young, "The Death Welders are back. And this time, nothing will stop them." The council delegates began to realize the same truth. They had laughed at humanity, mocked them, dismissed them as weak and soft. But now, with polite mode stripped away, they understood what their ancestors had once known. Humanity did not fight like others. Humanity did not yield, did not break, did not die quietly. They endured, and they struck when patience ended. And when they struck, the galaxy trembled. The ambassador raised his head one final time, his eyes sweeping the chamber, his voice calm and cold. "This meeting is over. The galaxy has made its choice. Now it must live with it." He turned and walked toward the great doors, his footsteps echoing across the silent hall. The delegates did not stop him. None dared. Behind him, the screens flickered once more, showing the Terran fleet dispersing into the void, their engines glowing like red eyes vanishing into the darkness. But everyone in the chamber knew this was not retreat. It was promise. The humans had revealed only a fraction of their strength, and that was enough to shake the foundations of the galaxy. As the doors closed behind the ambassador, the council sat frozen, their voices silent, their hearts heavy. They had witnessed the moment humanity's polite mask fell away. And now the galaxy would live in fear of what came next. For the first time in centuries, the council trembled, not from external war, not from political division, but from the return of a predator they thought they had destroyed. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting, dreading, knowing the storm had only begun. Humanity had spoken. Humanity had shown. And now, every world, every fleet, every empire would remember the truth. The galaxy trembled because the Death Welders had returned, and they would never be polite again.